Hi, everyone, and welcome to Psychic Perspectives. We are doing a series called Life Lessons Learned Through Mediumship, but these life lessons are for anybody. It's not just those who wanting to develop or connect with mediumship or are mediums. These are life lessons that are important to all of us. So if you're on a spiritual journey and you're interested in learning more about what we've learned through mediumship experiences, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are doing lesson number 7. And today we're going to be talking about spiritual laws or spiritual principles. But before you run away and you go, oh, okay, boring and snooze and all that other kind of stuff, there really is a lot of value to understanding and knowing. And if you are willing, applying the spiritual principles. So as always, I know I connect with spirit to get a channel lesson. I always ask Sarah to connect with her guides and her spiritual helpers to give her some insights. So before we dive into spiritual laws or spiritual principles, you have any initial thoughts, Sarah, on this particular episode?
Not up front. I just figure let's just jump right in.
She's like, no, let's just go. I can tell you're saving all your ammo for the channel lesson. Is that it?
Yeah, well, a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Okay, well, then we'll do that. For those of you who are listening along, remember that the downloadable link for what we're going to be reading on air today is available for you for free. If you want to download that, feel free to read along or save it and read it later. All right. So let's get started. So we're going to begin, and I love the way they start right off the get-go by saying spiritual laws are not contracts, for we in spirit are not lawyers. I love that, and that's so funny because we talked about contracts in the last episode.
Yes, yes,
and
I know.
they're kind of dovetailing. So again, if you haven't watched that episode, make sure that you do that. All right, so spiritual laws are not contracts, for we in spirit are not lawyers. We do not assign you life lessons or progress into dominions of apparent repercussions for those who do not obey. This is not what parents should do with their children either, for we are not parents, but rather guides and guardians, as well as co-creative beings living within the same universal frameworks as you. As such, the lessons you seek to learn are those that pertain to spiritual laws. But what are these, you say? Well, let us tell you. So before we go on, I mean, thoughts about these first couple of statements that they make right out the get-go?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because I was a little confused. I was like, wait, why are we talking about it in a way where um I guess it feels like a contract or I don't know. I never thought of it as a contract, I guess, or something like that. So
You
it was
never
just
thought of the
interesting that they
spiritual
brought
laws?
it up
Okay.
because I thought, well, there must be a lot of people out there that maybe have that perception and think of spiritual laws as some kind of law, you know,
Mm,
and that's just not it. So
mm-hmm.
it's just not the way it is. It's
Right,
it's,
right.
it's more like gravity, you
Yeah, it's
don't
kind of
have.
a universal constant, and they talk about that a little bit further on. But I mean, I think for lack of better words, we call it that here, but I think they're trying to ease it a little bit. And two, it's not
Right.
a
So
contract
I
in
thought it was
terms, yeah.
interesting the way they brought it up. I was like, okay,
Did it make sense though? Well, what I liked that was really interesting is they said the lessons that we seek to learn, and by the lessons meaning, we talked about soul contracts, or they used the word soul opportunities last time. Those are the lessons that we're here to learn, those opportunities, right? That's the theme that we're going through. But what they were talking about is that all of our lessons and our themes pertain to these spiritual laws. That in and of themselves makes them significant to our life, because if our theme is to deal with anger or hate or self-love, all of our life lessons dovetail into these principles or these laws. And I believe that that's what they were saying here. Was that pretty clear though?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
cool. All right. All right. So I'm just going to repeat what they said. But what are these you say? Well, let us tell you. In simple terms, spiritual laws are also opportunities for you. For wouldn't this be so if your life is about learning these themes? Does not the sole opportunity previously discussed give rise to the same opportunities to love, to serve, to obey, to understand, and to do so much more with your soul's existence? Now, when I heard the word obey, I immediately, because when I'm receiving this from spirit, I immediately have a response to certain words. And when I heard the obey, I'm like, what? I didn't like
Yeah,
that word. Did that
I don't
resonate?
either.
Yeah. And I think that's
Yeah.
because we're very strong personalities. And it's like to say obey kind of shocked me a little bit.
Yeah, immediately I'm like, nope.
Yeah. But they go on to explain, and I'll see how you feel about this. And they say, yes, we hear you rebel at the word obey, but it too is not what you think. For obeyance is not an order, but a request that serves only you. For when you obey these spiritual laws, it's you who wins, you and no one else. So, I mean, don't you feel like that kind of makes it sense at that point? I mean, we're the only ones that
Well, it's a
suffer the
little bit,
consequences of it.
I mean, it reminds me a little bit of parents, telling their kids certain things about safety issues. And, it's up to you to listen or not listen. And normally those things that we tell our children are for their safety and for their benefit.
Mhm.
So it's not about we want to dictate what you are doing.
Exactly,
It's
exactly.
about this is what's best for you, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
So I think we put our earthly connotations on some of the words, which is why, it's like they talked about laws as opportunities, right? Because again, going back to the soul contract episode, if you haven't watched it, let's not think of the word contract. Let's think of opportunity. They're taking these laws and talking about them as opportunities. And when they use the word obey, we have a human response to that. But it's really about following, is the word I'm hearing now,
Well, it's
right?
you kinda don't have a choice, though. It's not
You
about
don't. You
it's not
don't.
about choosing, it's about, like I said, gravity. Like, you don't have to believe in it at all, but it's there
Right.
and it affects you, and by knowing how it works, you don't jump off cliffs,
Right,
you
and
know?
that's the whole point, though. It's like, so you don't have a choice because it exists. That's a good example of jumping off the cliff. I hadn't thought of that. But it's like if you're gonna try to prove that gravity doesn't exist and then jump off the cliff, you're going to suffer the consequences. So you still
Right.
have the choice,
Right,
but
right.
you're going to be the one that ends up at the bottom of the cliff. I think that's a great comparison, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
that's really what this obey is. It's like, okay, don't
Right.
obey. It's not on us. You're
It's
the one's going to end
okay.
up splat at the bottom at the bottom of the cliff. I love that example. That's perfect. It's like the fool in the tarot card. It's like, do you or don't you?
Right,
That's what I'm
right.
seeing.
Take
Yeah.
that leap.
Take that leap. Yes. Okay. So then let's move on. So what are these said spiritual laws so that you can better understand them? We say they are God's edicts, but they don't come in the form of some divine law, but rather a general knowing of that which is true. For you see, God dictates to us to love, and yet what is our life but an absence of love? And so the more we come to see love, the closer we come to God. Is this a command per se, or something we must master, or even an order for you to obey? If this were the case, yours would be a far more loving world. Instead, the notion to love, or if you like, the law of love, is one that is a universal constant, not just throughout your physical world, but in all matters of existence. In these constants, we find a steady source of understanding and willingness in our being. It actually sets us free. It does not rope or tie us up as so many think. It is a guide, to be sure, for it can ease the dictates of our life. And yet, what do we do with these laws is really up to us. So, what were your thoughts about some of these things here?
Well, the unconditional love, like I almost wanted to do like a whole whole video on it because Um, it's such a hard thing to perfect, I guess. Not necessarily, but it is with our ego selves. Like
It is tough. It's very
it's
tough.
who we are innately. Like we're naturally in the form of love. Like that's how we were created. That's
Mhm,
how we
mhm,
should and want to react to things. But a lot of times we don't. And so it ends up being a choice,
mhm.
um, cause and effect, etc. And it is something that is like the creative force. Like it's a constant because that's what is like the basis of creation. That's like almost the definition of God.
Mhm,
For
mhm.
lack of a better term, it
No,
would
I
be like
agree.
a
Right,
loving creative
right.
force, right?
Yes,
So it's
yes.
all around us, it's in us. Um, we can't escape it, but we do have to like
Mhm,
refine ourselves and continue
mhm.
to learn more how to be in that unconditional state. I think that's the key.
Very true. Yeah. And we had talked about whether or not we wanted to get into the laws very deeply in this episode. And then we discussed, we thought well, let's just kind of cover the spiritual laws more in depth. Like we're doing this Life Lessons Through Mediumship series. We decided, because you're right, love is such a big topic. Manifestation is such a big topic. Choice is such a big topic. Those are all, kind of what we consider principles or laws, so to speak. So we
Yeah.
thought, well, we're just going to do another series and we're going to talk about those more in depth so that if there's one that you really want to focus on, you can. So I agree with you. Love is a very difficult concept, especially when we're in ego, right? I mean, how
Well,
many
it's
of
not
us?
just love too. It's this, what does unconditional love mean?
Mhm.
Unconditional. There's no conditions, no strings attached. I think
I don't know
we
if that's
can
even possible in ego, honestly.
well,
I
I
mean,
I think that it's something that we strive for in ego. That's the
it
whole
is,
point.
it is,
So
it is.
it's literally like your goal. It's like
Mhm.
if you that's your one goal in life is to practice that, you'll be better off
But I mean,
overall.
that's really a lofty ideal. I mean, let me play the opposing side here and say, I know, I'm like, I'm not going to achieve that. I'm an ego. So why would I even bother? Because that's such a lofty ideal.
Then that's your choice and you won't. So it's the idea that in everything that you do, you have a choice to make. You
Mhm,
can choose to say, well, I'm not going to love that person because they did this and that and the other.
mhm,
Or um maybe it's a judgment, or
mhm.
it's
Absolutely. I understand.
like
Yeah.
I said, it's just a string attached. It's with condition. I love you because you did this for me, not
Mhm.
because it was just freely given.
Right.
And it's not that lofty of a concept. It's just really hard to do because we're so used to I guess our own wants and needs, basically, is
I
what it
think
boils
that's
down
better.
to.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess I wasn't saying it well enough. You're right. I don't think the concept itself is lofty. I think what I was not saying properly that you did is that doing it is difficult because we
Yes.
are ego. I mean,
Mhm.
I've married my soulmate and I say I love him unconditionally, but at the same time, let's say theoretically in one moment he decides he wants to go sleep with another person. I'm like, how am I going to respond to that? Do
Unconditional love right out the window.
That's exactly right. So I do have a condition. I would still love him, don't get me wrong, but would I choose to continue to stay with him under those, because we have to have
Well, this
self-love
is the thing.
first.
It doesn't mean you
Unconditional
have
love
it
starts
doesn't
with us.
it's not about staying. It's not about staying in the situation. It's about it would be about forgiveness at that point. It doesn't mean you have, and you don't have to forgive him and stay with him.
Right.
It's about understanding he had those issues or things, whatever it was,
Whatever it was.
issues with
Mhm,
him, has nothing to do with you. You
mhm.
forgive him, you move on. You could stay together, but it's just a matter of
It's a matter
that's
of
choice
choice
too.
again. It's choice
So
again. Right.
again, when people hurt us,
Mhm,
and we talk about I'm sorry, unconditional love,
mhm.
um, it's not unconditional forgiveness. It's not you can do whatever the hell you want to me and
Right.
I'm
That's
supposed to be
exactly right.
okay with
That's
that.
exactly right. Right.
So it's just it is hard to apply. in certain circumstances, especially when it comes to betrayal, when it
Right.
comes to being hurt or some kind of,
Right.
unsavory
Right.
outside
And that
circumstance.
was just an example because I just wanted to throw something out that I could relate to personally so I could have a conversation. Not saying that he did that, but I'm saying that would be that's a condition
Theoretical, right?
almost, that I have a theoretical condition. But, something that came up as you were talking about that, and it dawned on me, it's like the first law of love is to love ourselves, though, first.
Exactly.
And
Yes,
so if that happened at that point, am I loving myself by staying in the relationship if that happened?
exactly.
Right? And that's going to be unique to the situation. So
Right.
just because we unconditionally love someone doesn't mean we cease to love ourselves. And I think that
Exactly.
all wraps into, which is why we could talk about this for an entire hour all in and of itself, but it is a great topic that you brought up. Yes. Yeah.
There's got to be people out there that really are thinking of spiritual laws as like, I have to obey these spiritual laws like a religion,
I know,
or
I was a little surprised too at some of the words they used,
because
and
I
then
was like,
yeah.
why would that come up? Like, that's not a thing. To me, spiritual laws are strictly, it's not nothing that you can get around. It's not about obeying or not obeying. It's about, this is a
Mhm.
truth that you can't avoid. This is like gravity. This is
It
like,
is, but I'm wondering if people don't see it that way, because we think that, we live in a society today where, and I know that I was this way for a while. No one's going to tell me what I have to do, right? Where it's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to love you because you did do this or you didn't do this, right?
right.
And we think that we're being told what we need to do. I In the beginning, just a little bit, I kind of thought that way, but I quickly came to understand that that isn't what this is about.
Right. So I
So
kind of feel like maybe that should be brought up because it's
mhm,
like, well,
mhm.
we're not talking about spiritual laws because this is something you have to obey, or this is some kind of new age religion,
Right, it's not
or
dogma. It's not dogma,
right, or
right?
because
Yes.
this is stuff that has been
Mhm,
talked about for centuries. And
mhm.
um, you know, I don't know how much more is left, but it's like in the Bible, it you know, Jesus talks about how to pray because he's literally explaining how the law of attraction works. So
Mhm.
when in the Bible he explains this is how you pray, that's why you pray that way, not because Jesus told you to do it, but because this is how the law of attraction
Absolutely.
works.
No, that's really beautifully said. I agree with you.
Mhm.
But I think both know that people look at that in terms of reading the Bible and feeling like you have to believe this is because this is exactly what it says. And I think then people are missing the point. The Bible is about truth. I think there's spiritual laws and spiritual principles are in all kinds of books, whether
Mhm.
they're religious or non-religious, self-help, personal development, understanding these. And I think that's why they're saying, look, it's not about edicts or laws or rules or obey, or it's like these are underlying threads of who we are.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe it's about dispelling that myth of looking at it as obey or else. Does that make
Right.
sense?
And I guess that's what threw me off was because I
Mhm.
was like, I've never looked at it that way. I've always looked at it as like
Mm.
this is something that's unavoidable. And
Mhm.
it's again, it's like you either let it work for you or you let it work against you.
Right. No, no, very true. And so it's good that you say that. It's interesting that you didn't have that perspective. You never saw it that way, because I do know there was a time in my life where I did see it that way. It was very early on in my opening because I had had what I considered to be a negative experience with my Christian upbringing. I felt
Right.
like I was being told to do certain things. And that,
Okay.
again,
Yeah.
that's not my nature, you
Mhm.
know?
I know, I know. And that's same because as soon as I heard the word obey in the channel
See,
thing, and then I was like,
even you had a response to it, right? But remember, we said from Soul Thing, that which triggers you tells us there's something in us that we need to. So I
yes,
was
I
triggered
am
by
I
that
am a
word too.
rebel.
I got it. And
But
none of us are free from that. So in
right.
the beginning, I did struggle with that a little bit because I had to get past the understanding that it wasn't, this you're going to get your butt spanked if you don't look both ways before you cross the road kind of a thing. It's like, it's because if you cross the road, you could get hit.
Right.
That's for you. That's for us.
Right. And that's
It's
kind of
not.
what they said, made it
And
sound like in the
that's
beginning.
where you may have had an innate understanding of that, which is fabulous. But for me, it wasn't. And I had
Well,
to
that's
grow
interesting.
into
Yeah.
that. I had to
Hmm.
grow into that acceptance. And
Yeah.
for some people, I'm kind of hearing now is that that's going to take trust and faith. And if you don't believe or have a faith in God or believe in God, you're going to go, I don't believe in God, so why do these things apply? Well, because it's like gravity. It doesn't matter whether you believe in a higher power, these are still universal constants.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
something to consider. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they go on to say, so what else can we tell you of these laws? First, that they exist and are real. The second is that no one being or soul created them. They simply are. And we've already said this, right? That they are above reproach and exist within all planes of existence, even in the darkest of realms. This is why no one and nothing can escape God, for there is no one or nowhere that can escape the laws of the universal God. I feel like you want to say something to that, so I'll stop.
Um, I think
I
it's just,
loved that. I thought it was
yeah.
beautiful.
Well, I like it because I say all the time um that m- my beliefs don't require you to believe what I believe.
Mhm,
So if you can't wrap your mind around some kind of universal law that exists whether or not you believe it,
mhm.
then this lesson is not for you.
I do think that people maybe misunderstand that, and that's the point of doing the episode, is to kind of clarify for those who are interested, because some will not be interested. And that's where I had to kind of come to an understanding and acceptance of some of these principles. I even remember um, sharing the comment many, many years ago that I had been getting information about spiritual laws and principles to another medium that you and I both know. And he said, I don't believe that there is such a thing. And I was floored. And so, because I was early in my development and I respected this individual, I started doubting what I was getting from spirit. And I started looking at it again. And then one day I went back to him and I gave him an example. And he goes, oh, okay, I see your point. It had never crossed his mind.
Right. Well, I think a lot of these concepts that we talk about do require your experience to really absorb them into your life and then later on try to apply it, right? So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
when I was first learning about the universal laws, and especially the law of attraction was mainly the first one that I started learning about.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
um I mean, you can listen to that crap all day long and it doesn't absorb. Like,
mm-hmm,
or you think that you have the concept. Again, we've talked about this before. You have the concept, but
mm-hmm,
you don't have that deeper level understanding.
mm-hmm.
And
Right,
so,
right.
it may or may not resonate. And until you really start to, I guess, continuously,
Work with it.
yeah,
Right.
it's like then you can start to learn how to apply it. There's no other way to explain it, but so many people have said, maybe it was the one person that said a certain thing and it finally clicked.
Right,
And they're
right.
like, oh my God, I get it now.
Mm-hmm,
For me, there was a point where it was like, this isn't alchemy. This is a process of faith, of action, of
mm-hmm,
thoughts,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
and creation. And so all of these things have to come together.
Right,
You can't just manifest out of nothing. Because
right.
well, I don't believe in law of attraction because I'm not gonna be manifesting a red Corvette in my front yard anytime soon. Well, yeah, you're right. You're not going to manifest a red Corvette just like that in your front yard anytime
Right,
soon.
right.
But you could put it out there that this is what you want, And
Mhm.
how is it that that would come to you?
Mhm.
Maybe you should enter a contest. Maybe you should make sure you
Right.
have the kind of job that's
Right.
going to afford the red Corvette. Maybe you should rethink certain things. So it's not just about
Mhm.
wishing in one hand and hoping that it shows up in the
Well,
other.
and I think The Secret did a lot of damage, honestly, even though, and there's been other manifesting books that are out there, because again, this is a spiritual principle. It's a spiritual law. Manifestation or is creation. That's all it is. It's about creation, right? Let's just use a different word. And I think that people have made money off of talking about the principle through The Secret, through other types of things. And for people who are maybe not prepared or are looking at the material gain that they want to get out of it, they're missing the deeper truth. It's just like somebody reading the Bible and missing the deeper truth that
Well,
could
and
be
that's
in
the
it.
same though with The Secret. I don't think that I don't think that it was a bad thing or that it
I
messed
don't
people up,
either.
but it's just you have to read it multiple times and you have to like embody these concepts and really
Mhm.
try to deeply understand them, or you're
Mhm.
wasting your time because
But I think people saw the superficial level is what I'm saying. They just saw, the tip of the iceberg of the principle, if as it were. That's kind of what I'm getting at
well, I
here.
think when you first see it, yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the whole point is that, you kind of, you're like,
Mhm.
oh, wow, there's a secret manifestation book that I could, just
Where I could
manifest
get the
whatever.
red Corvette, or I can be
Yeah.
rich, or I can be, that's kind of missing the point, because there are other
But it talks
principles
about
that
that in the
apply
book.
into
So,
that.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, and they talk about the alchemy of it,
Mhm.
where it's like it
Mhm.
requires your faith. Faith is probably number one. If you
Mhm.
don't believe in what you're doing, you don't believe in yourself,
Mhm.
number one, you're
Mhm.
not going to manifest anything because you don't believe it.
Right.
And this whole idea of like going back to the obey thing, when we say things like you need to keep your thoughts positive and stop being so pessimistic. It's not
Mhm.
because I want to freaking tell you what to do all day long. It's like this is this
Right.
is not about obeying that. It's about
Applying it.
applying it and then
Mhm.
fucking find out what happens,
Right.
when you
Right.
start changing your
Working with the
thoughts.
principle, working with
Right.
it. Yes, yes.
Exactly.
No, I agree. And I think, that's a good discussion, because we were talking about the law of manifestation and how technical it is. But when we go back to where the discussion we just had about unconditional love, it's complicated. We can't just say, oh, it's a law, it's a principle, and I'm going to be perfect at it. No, that's why the whole channel lesson says this is why our life contracts, our life lessons revolve around these themes, because they are so complex.
Right.
We have to play them out in different scenarios to understand them.
Right. Right. Right.
And you've
And it's
resonated with
trial and
manifest.
error.
It is
Yeah.
trial and error.
Yeah.
It's about learning. And
Hmm.
yours has been very much about law of manifestation, because I know you talk about that. For
Hmm.
me, the law of choice has been huge, huge.
Same.
This is
Yeah.
really
No,
more
it's.
a theme for me than the
Mhm.
manifestation part. But that's not the only principle we have to apply. You're right, it's alchemy. And that's why knowing these principles matter, and going, well, I got to mix a little manifestation, and then I got to throw in some trust, and then I need 2 teaspoons of love, and then,
Yeah. Yeah. But that's
you
what it
know,
is.
and
Yeah.
it is a variety of different things. And thinking of all of that, it's like, it is overwhelming. I mean, even sitting here and just talking about it, if I were a human being wanting to live my life, be happy, we're kind of going, gosh, that's overwhelming. And it can be, because
You
we're
know,
not going to master them. They're so complex.
right. Well, one of the best advice I ever got was from you about how like like
I don't
how do
remember
you
when that was.
I know, right? No, it was like when you were like, well, how do you want your day to look every day? How
Yeah.
and I tell this to people all the time now. I'm like, how do you want your day to look every day?
Mhm.
When you wake up in the morning and you do this and you do that. This is how you start to
Right.
manifest. It's these little tiny things that you have to change in your everyday routine, for example.
Right.
And then you combine that with positive thinking, faith,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
all the esoteric kind of stuff. And then
It's
watch.
work.
Yeah,
It's
it
work. It's
is work,
application. It's
but it's
application.
alchemy. And so it has to be all of
Yes.
it. It can't just be, oh, I'm going to work really hard, but I'm going to have a bad attitude when I do it. because that's just going to continue this like
Right.
negative cycle.
Well, I wanted to write today, but the kids came home early from school and the husband was complaining and I didn't get to do it. It's like,
Right. Or this
that's not
idea
really,
even too, where people are like, well, only that's great that you get to work in something that, you follow your passions at. No, not all of us are that lucky. Well, okay, I fully understand that to a certain extent, but it's like, because we all have to have 9 to 5 jobs at some point,
Mhm,
or at least we go through that phase at least
mhm,
before we
mhm,
can
mhm,
figure out what it is.
mhm.
So I encourage people to, again, what's your day going to look like? Fill it with things that you
Right,
want, that
right.
are important to you, because at the end of your life,
Mhm,
that's what's going to matter.
mhm. Right.
Period.
Very true. Yeah. Yeah. Good examples. Good examples. So let me get back to where we were kind of reading because we tangented, but I think they were great tangents. This is the whole point, is having a discussion about the laws and the principles. But what I wanted to get back to was when they were talking about what else can we tell us about the laws. Well, we know they exist and are real. I think we've hammered that home. That no one being or created them. This isn't like they just are. They're just
Well,
part of the
who
existence and
created
the fabric
gravity?
of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we call it God, so to speak, because there's or divine, or if you're not religious and you want to call it nature or science, great. It doesn't change anything, right?
Right.
It's still, it just is. Capital I, capital S. It
Yes.
just is.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
can't change gravity. You can't blame the person who created it and say that's not the way it's going to work.
Right.
That's foolish. This is what these laws and principles are about. But then I liked where they went on to talk about that regardless of the dimension, right? So let's say,
Right.
our physical body dies. They're talking about these are considered spiritual laws, or if you want to call them, I've heard them called universal laws, because it doesn't matter when you die from physical body, they still apply. When you go
Right.
to another experience, whether it's this planet, another one, and astral, wherever it is that we go, still applies.
Right. So it's
Nothing
funny. Yeah, that
changes.
was interesting. It came up in a reading where they were talking about how it's a really good idea to get a hold of your thoughts now in life, because when you do get to the other side, um the law of manifestation is the same, but it's also more quick. So um if you don't have control over it, you can start manifesting things you really don't want, just bam, 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 bam.
I hadn't heard that before,
So
but yeah,
it's funny that
it
you brought
makes
that up. I
sense.
did hear that once
Mhm,
before.
mhm.
And that, to me, again, also reiterates why it's important to practice this in life, you know, is to kind of get this
Sure.
idea down before we get back over there.
Because we know choice and free will don't stop upon leaving the physical body. We become more aware, we have greater perception, but all of these principles still apply. And so the
Right.
more we come to understand them, whether in physical body or out, it's not going to change. They're
Yeah.
the same. And I love that about this. What I also liked about this particular paragraph is that these principles even apply in darker realms, which is a great way to, whether we want to talk about evil or anything else, which in other words means nothing escapes God. Now, this is a religious truth. We've been told this in religion. This is in the Bible. God is
Mhm.
greater than everything else. And we're
Right.
like, yeah, but then why does this happen? And why does that happen? And why does that happen? But think about that for a moment. The principle applies no matter what.
Yeah.
So
No,
good
it's me.
and
When
evil
I
can't
see,
escape it.
I call them universal laws,
Mhm,
because to me that's what they are. It doesn't matter
mhm.
where you are in the universe, what species you are in the universe. Like,
Right.
these concepts apply to everything in the universe.
Absolutely.
And that's why they
Mhm.
are called universal laws.
Right.
It's almost more science than it is actual beliefs in anything. It's
I
because,
agree. I agree. But because they deal with consciousness as opposed to physical
right,
matter, we
there's
tend
no
to
proving
consider
it.
them spiritual, right? We consider them
Mhm.
woo woo or whatever. And I'm like, but we are consciousness. Consciousness has rules and laws. It's like we know that, but well, some people do.
Well, in quantum physics, they talk about it too. So it's not just,
Absolutely. No, no,
it's
no.
not just this like new age, dogma religion that we're trying to,
Absolutely. Right. I mean,
peddle.
yes. I mean, parapsychology talks about the experiments they've done with intention, intention to heal, intention to affect physical objects. There is scientific and laboratory work done. And this is proving that the law of manifestation or creation or psychokinesis or PK, there's all different kinds of words for it, depending on who you're talking to it.
Mhm.
We talk about it in spiritual terms. If you talk to people who are studying it, they're going to use much more scientific terms. And then when
Right.
you get out into the general public and mainstream who thinks it's all a bunch of crap, they're going to make the words even more benign,
Right.
to make it a little more palatable. But we're all talking the same stuff. Same
Mhm.
stuff. But going back to this, I just like the way that it addresses the fact that dark entities or dark beings or negativity, it you're still bound by these laws. That's the power that we have by understanding these principles over these negative forces. They're still bound to them
Right.
because nothing escapes. And it even says this, and there is no one and nowhere that can escape the laws of the universal God. Everything is subject to
Mhm.
that. Thought that was beautiful. Anyway, but I'm
Yeah.
biased.
Well, it's
But it's
true
well
though.
said. It's
You
well
can't
said.
escape God, and you can never be outside of God. So there you go.
Absolutely. Very true. So they go on as they were talking about what else can we tell you about these laws. So after that, they say that laws are designed to help us live, not to feel chained or mandated or denied. The term law is one that penetrates your world and feels stifling. But in our world, meaning the spiritual world, a law is not an edict, but rather a freeing principle. So find, if you will, a better word that allows you to understand these principles. Set them to memory for your own advancement and freedom. For we in spirit do not care, as it were, that you choose one direction toward the laws or another. That is for you to experience. And in so choosing a direction, you will intentionally drive yourself either towards the edict or away from it. But none shall suffer the ramifications save you. And we've already talked about this, which is why they're trying to get us to think about this, I think, in a different way, is that
Yeah, well, it's law of cause and effect, So like when I put my elbow up like this and I hit the table, ow. But
we're
that's
never
just
going to
it, is
escape them.
that
It's for our
law of cause and
benefit,
effect, law of choice, like these that we say laws, but they're just there,
which is
like
why they
gravity.
changed. This was the first time I think they used the word principles in here. And because remember, I use whatever weird words I hear because it has meaning.
Universal principles is
Universal
good.
principles is a
Yeah,
great
I
way to
mean,
do it. Yeah.
it's good. I mean, that's acceptable to me. I mean, I don't know why laws is such a bad word other than the connotation that comes with it, but
I think it depends
I
on the
think it's
person.
I think it's surprising a little bit that people thought of it that way, maybe because to me it's just something that is.
Right.
It's not a religious, it's not a new age
Right.
thing. I know a lot of Christians actually think that. They're like, be careful of the new agers. They're gonna lead you to the devil, because they talk about the law of attraction. But again, Jesus explains how to pray in the Bible. If you understand the law of attraction when you're reading how Jesus
Mhm.
explains how to pray in the Bible, you will understand that Jesus is talking about law of attraction without saying, listen here, disciples, this is about the law of attraction, and you better listen up and you better follow the law or else. That's
Not to
not it.
mention there's science proving that the law of attraction, with which they use different terminology again, remember, there's plenty of scientific evidence that it has significance. Even nurses now are using touch therapy and things like energy healing. It's gaining traction. Remember when yoga was crazy? Remember when meditation was crazy and now it's mainstream? Look,
Hmm.
guys, there's science behind this stuff. It's a principle because it has a scientific foundation. It's
Right.
been touted in spirituality because again, it ties to consciousness and living, and so I get your point. And this may be about making it a little more watered down so that different people who look at it in different perspectives can still embrace it, right? By giving it a variety of terms.
I get that.
Yeah.
Again, it's not a religion. It's
No, no,
in
that's
fact,
like
it's
saying
more
gravity's a
science.
religion.
Yeah, it's more science than
Mm-mm.
anything. But
Yeah.
that's just my opinion. So,
Yep. No, I agree. I agree. So they go on to say, now, yes, those about you will suffer as a result of your choices, but this is merely an opportunity for them as well to see you as an opposition to the law and not them, or else to savor the moment and move away from God's word. So I think this was kind of, you even talked about cause and effect a little bit there, but it was like, if I make a bad decision, right? Let's go back to that spouse that isn't faithful kind of scenario. That person made a choice, and of course it's going to have repercussions because we learned in the last life lesson that no choice is made in isolation. So there are ramifications, and they're not saying that there aren't, but that gives us an opportunity to either see a new principle in a different light and how we're going to respond to it, because that's all we can control. That's
right.
really basically all that's saying, is because we know the world today is not living in terms of some of these universal principles, right? They're kind of moving in that opposite direction. They're moving away from the principle, and so life is becoming more difficult. That affects the whole,
Well,
what this is saying.
if you think of universal principles or universal laws
Mhm,
as
mhm,
God, because it's kind of like the dynamics or the circumstances that he's laid out for us
mhm,
in a way where it's unavoidable,
mhm,
then I guess you can kind of look at it that way where, when you're going along with it, then you're going closer with God. And when you're going
mhm,
against it, you're going against God.
mhm.
And I guess I don't really like that example very much because I just got done saying that this is not a religious thing, but but there is a certain amount of faith involved, which is why it's an alchemy, and it is a spiritual law. So I don't know how to get around,
Well, you could
the
take your God out
dichotomy
of
of
the
it being
equation
that
and
it's
just call
it's
it a.
partly spiritual and it's partly scientific. I mean,
Mhm.
and when you're going with the flow of these things, you're literally going with God. And when you're going against the grain, you're going against it because by not doing it, you're hurting yourself. It's just like we talked about in the very
Right,
beginning. When we tell our kids, hey, maybe you should not do that. Don't run around with scissors. Not
right,
because, we want to tell you what to do 24/7, but because if you fall down, you're going to hurt yourself.
right.
Um, that's kind of it. I mean,
But there are consequences, and I think that's the point, though, is that they were saying is that not only are there consequences for the individual, but because if someone else chooses to move away from a principle, that does affect the whole. There's no way to avoid it. But the only thing we can do is choose how we're going to respond to that. And that was
right.
something that we talked about in the previous lesson of soul contracts, is there's just no way around it because we are all interconnected. But
Hmm.
they talk about that as an opportunity for us, right? If someone is moving in the wrong direction, that provides opportunities for us to understand other principles. Let's use today's society, right? Let's talk about the culture that we're going through right now. I know that it stirs sometimes anger in you, and it stirs frustration in me. I've kind of gotten past the anger stage a little bit. I was really afraid for a long period of time. So because I can't control what's going on with society, the only thing I control is myself. So I had to kind of go, what are these bad things that are happening inside in society triggering in me, and what principles do I need to apply to get away from falling into that trap of that and moving closer to the principle. Otherwise, I'm just going to be like everybody else, jumping on the bandwagon, being angry and being mad and being moving in the wrong direction.
Right. And I know I'm guilty of this because I do get really frustrated. As far as like an answer to that goes, is would be, instead of being angry about it, because nobody really listens to me when I'm angry, I guess. Or start becoming numb to it or something. It's like it's better to try, I guess, because all we can do is control ourselves, to try to do it in a way where you're just presenting questions to people. You're just making them have to ask the question, because we can't change their opinions, and really being mad about it is only hurting me,
It
right?
is. That's right. And
So,
that's I wasn't picking on you. I think that was just a good example for
well, I think it's
people
a
to
good example to talk
understand,
about. No, it's fine. I don't
because
care.
so
Pick
many
on
people
me,
feel that way right
because
now.
a
Yeah.
lot of people are doing it right now, and and they
Mhm.
post with vigor, you
Mhm.
know.
Yes, we're all
So,
very passionate right now about what's going on. Absolutely.
right. And so rather than sit there and say, no, you're right, or you're wrong, or I'm
Mhm.
right and you're wrong, whatever it is, um, just try to present your facts in ways that people can accept them. Um, which is really hard when you're being censored all the time, I suppose. But it's also just the idea that you're planting seeds, you know, you're planting them with the best intentions. You don't plant the seed and be like, that's not going to grow, right? So you have to plant the seed with intention that that will grow. Um, don't do it angrily, I guess, is the
But
thing.
that's the point of what, a friend of mine, I was having a conversation with her about a week or so ago with some issues that I was having. And she said, what angers you really says that there's something inside of you. Now, it can be a positive thing, can let you know that what's happening in the world perhaps is something that you feel very passionately is not good for you. But interestingly enough, many people in the world are find that some of the things that are happening in the world are good for them. They're not being angered by it. And that becomes the challenge. So I don't want to get off into this long conversation and losing track. I guess the point is we have to bring it back to us, because we can't control what society is going to do, or our friends, or our family, or our spouse, or our kids. The only thing we can control is how do I move closer to the principles in this given moment? Even if this given moment sucks and someone else isn't, I can either get on the bus and ride the wrong direction with them, or I can figure out what principle I need to apply in my life right now to make this situation at least go better for me.
Right.
Because then we're moving, like you said, towards God, which is where we're supposed to be taking things in the first place.
Hmm.
And it has to start with us.
Right.
It just
Well,
does.
I've
Not that
always,
we're perfect.
right. I've always been like, oh, you can't just put your head in the sand. Because one of the things that they talk about all the time is, if you want to manifest something good, or you want to make a change, you have to focus on what it is that you want, not what it is that you don't want. So
Correct.
me bitching online about all the different things is
Mhm.
really putting more energy into the things that I don't want to
Which is the
see,
wrong
versus
direction. Right.
versus
Right.
the things that I do want to see. So depending on how I put that out there, so if I say, and this is going back to how Jesus says to pray. You pray in the positive. You pray for the things and talk about the things that you want to have happen, the
Mhm.
change that you're looking for, and
The
the things that
blessings that
you
you want
want
for
to see.
yourself and for others.
Mhm.
It's
In the
yes.
positive, not, oh, well, I wish so and so would stop doing that. It's, I wish so and so would change this to this, because that's what I want.
Well, I would even disagree that that's a bad prayer, because you should never wish for something for someone else that will violate their free will. To me,
Okay.
that's a
Uh,
violation of
I'm not
principle.
talking about, I'm not,
Yeah.
okay, let that about,
But I
sure,
know
bad
what you
example.
mean.
But
I know what you
I'm
mean.
saying
Yeah. 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 I just
talk
didn't want
about things, you talk about things in the positive, you make positive affirmations.
yes,
And the
yes,
more
I
faith
agree. Yep.
that you have in those, and the more faith that you have while you're
Mhm.
saying those affirmations, will add to the potency of your intention
Absolutely.
as you
Yes.
put it out into the
Right.
universe. So we do have to be mindful, and that's why we're constantly saying, be mindful of your thoughts, be mindful of, your intentions, be mindful of how you're feeling,
Mhm.
because your emotions
Mhm.
are like magnets to the
They are.
universe.
They are. Right.
And the more that you're putting out this angry emotion, the more you're
Mhm.
ending up with things that, it's like the universe doesn't hear that that's what you don't like. it only resonates with how you are, right?
Mhm.
And that's part of the spiritual laws where you do have a choice, okay? So you can consciously twist that and make it better, or you just keep generating this negativity. And that's
Mhm.
where we're talking about you have the option to be closer to the concept
Mhm.
or farther away from it.
Right.
Um,
Yep. No, very true. Very well
I hope
said.
that makes sense, but
Yes, yes. And I think this is why, we weren't going to get into the laws too much today, because I had a feeling, at least a gut feeling. I'm like, I have a feeling we're just going to talk about why the spiritual laws even matter. And as clearly, just getting people to understand why these are relevant is more important than addressing one at this moment, right?
right,
It's about
right.
recognizing the depth and the power that comes in this life lesson, so that we can begin to at least embrace whichever one or different ones we want
Well,
to
there's a
apply.
ton of them actually, and you
There
can go
are.
online and you can look up the
Overwhelming.
universal laws.
Yes.
Um, I think that you can't read them enough because it's like you'll read it and you'll be like, wow, that's really cool. And you'll have an aha moment
Mhm.
maybe or whatever it is, but you won't really understand it until all of a sudden you get to put it into application in your life and you're like,
Right.
wow, okay, now I understand,
But again, that
at
can
least
be
the
overwhelming.
gravity of it.
I've got a printout from a website that has the 108 universal principles or universal laws, whatever it is. And I thought 108. I'm like, oh
That's
my
what I was
gosh.
108. We're not
Yeah, there
talking
was
about 108
108.
laws.
I've got the handout right here on my desk, and I thought that's insane. So it is overwhelming. As always, we always tell people take it to spirit, right? Do a prayer, do a meditation, do a whatever. If you're drawn to manifestation, then go study that. If you're drawn to this principle, then go study that one.
Well, a lot
Um,
of them go hand in hand, ironically, because
they do,
we
but you
talk
don't know
about the
where to
law of
start.
attraction, and then you have the law of free will, and you have the law of cause and
Mhm,
effect. These
mhm,
all kind of like go
mhm.
together with the law of attraction, or
They
it's
do. They
it's
do.
part of cause and effect. You see what
They
I'm saying?
do.
So cause and effect is there, it's all connected.
Right.
So
They are. That's the whole point of it. Yeah. It's like
yeah.
they're kind of like this fabric. But for people who might say, oh my gosh, there's 108 of them, I don't even know where to start. I think my suggestion was just kind of meditating and asking spirit to lead you to maybe the one that you most need at this moment,
Yeah,
because it
that's a
may
good idea.
change based on the circumstance that you're in. Right. But again, it's always about moving closer towards those godlike principles, or if you want to call them universal principles or scientific laws or whatever that apply to consciousness. Pick your words. Doesn't matter. It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Moving in that direction, because one may be very relevant in your life or your soul contract, right? Your theme. It may be very pertinent to you. So start with that one, because that may be the one that will benefit you the most. And then you'll learn about the others
Yes.
as you go along. I think
Mhm.
that's my suggestion, because people say, well, how do I start studying mediumship, or how do I start becoming psychic? Work with your strengths, work with the one that's there, work with whatever, and then the
For
rest of it
me,
will follow. The
yeah,
rest of it
for
will
me, the law of
follow.
attraction was the first one that I ran into, and
Mhm.
I just kind of started learning about it. And then the more I started learning about it, the more I started kind of finding these other universal
It's
laws.
clearly very important to your life. And so you've been drawn to that, not to say that the others don't matter, because again, we don't escape the principles, they always apply. But
Right.
one may be more relevant to your life theme, which is what they talked about in this lesson. So,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay. All right. So moving on, it says, we can't in spirit say to you, do this or else, for there is no one here who does this. And we talked about that in the judgment life lesson. Nobody judges us, right? It is you who experiences directly the ramifications of the or else. So it is you who does this to yourself, knowingly or unknowingly, just like gravity. Even if we don't know about it, you're still bound to it. It's
Yep.
up to you to decide if that. So then they go on to say, so how can we find salvation? Not in terms of serving or even obeying some god or deity upon the heavens, for we tell you this is not the case. The God you seek is not a being, but rather a rational and loving force that binds all things within the known universe/realms. Here is the God you seek. And if you truly do seek to know or understand God, then it is the said ways of this force that one should seek to attire, meaning wear or put on. For here is the mainstay of God itself, the laws that bind not just humanity, but all creatures and beings. So no hate mail. I'm just giving you what I hear, but
Right.
over a period of time, God is a force to me. It's everything. When we pray to God, we're praying to the all. We're praying to nature, to other humanity, to collective consciousness, to the all, because God is all. We're activating the most massive force that there is. So take this or leave it if it fits for you, but it was relevant to me. Thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Well, when talking about the nature of God, I think that the 13 attributes of God that every Muslim is required to know is very it's very good. Maybe people can look that up, but it kind of talks about how, like, you can't be outside of God. You
Mhm.
know, and it describes it in such a way where it kind of reminds me of this, where it's like, you again, you can't be outside of it, you are subject to it, and it is nothing that we can wrap our minds around per
Mhm.
se.
Mm-mm.
So don't try.
Right,
Just,
exactly. You're just
you
right,
know
right. Don't
just
define it.
understand that it's a unconditional loving force, and that we are connected in all ways to
Mhm.
it
Yep.
and subject to it, whether we like it or not. So you don't have to believe in it, you're
Right.
in it, you know and yeah, I think
Okay.
that's it.
Got it. So we'll move on. It says, do not get confused with laws or principle or edicts or rules or ways that apply to your world, for each realm has its own unique truths. We are speaking of truths with a capital T, with a higher calling, those that permeate all realms, regardless of belief or existence or understanding. So again, kind of a little repetitive there, but they're saying, look, the principles apply through all existences. Yes, there are unique, smaller truths that apply to each domain, right? It's like we're here in matter, so there we're subject to time. Things are slower, things are denser. Those are small truths with a small t, because they apply to
Right.
this dimension. That's
Right.
not the case with the universal truths. They're a capital T. They apply, they're the fabric through all of it. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
um then they go on to say, we will set before you a few and delve more into these in the coming days. But know that love, truth, and free will are the highest of these. There's the three that they gave us right out the get go. And we've already talked about love and free will, and I forgot about truth. That's a huge one, right? That's a huge one. So one permeates the soul at the heart level, the other at the mind, and the other at the core of the being. I love the way they put this. We seek love in all manners of the heart. We seek truth in all manners of the mind. And within the given body, whatever form it takes, the soul is always standing on the crux of free will and the decision points it is allowed to make. Here too resides consequence, for there can be no choice without consequence, either towards the law or opposing it. I thought this was probably one of the most beautiful statements. Love for our heart, truth for our mind, and choice. And regardless of whether in a physical body or we're out of a physical body or we're in some other dimension, truth, love, and choice, they're right. To me, they reign supreme. So I'm not undermining law of manifestation or anything else, but we find that all of these kind of get wrapped under the umbrella of those three.
They're universal constants. So it's everywhere.
Yeah. So those are some great ones for people to start off with or to think about. How are those applying in your life? Because there's
Yeah.
a big difference between the truth that applies to you as Sarah or me as Carol versus truth with a capital T, that regardless of how much we argue about it, we're both subject to it either way, right? Those are
Exactly.
very different. Okay. So they go on to say, for it can be no other way. What else can we say at this time? Understand that the rules apply to you and are designed for freedom and blessings, not punishments and curses. For no loving God sets you up for failure. We heard that in soul contracts, the same channeled stuff. No, God sets you up for failure. Quite the opposite. But a loving God does allow you to learn for yourself what the measures of these rules mean. And in so doing, you decide for yourself the suffering or ease that you desire to know. Then they say, we leave you with this today to explore, for until one can even accept the idea of greater edicts, what say we will have little accord, meaning, well, it doesn't matter what they say. If we're not willing to accept the idea, it's irrelevant, right?
And that's just it. Yeah.
Yeah. You dismiss the knowings of God as some belief, not realizing they're actually the very threads of our lives. When you see this and know, you will not become God, but rather will understand that there is God and how this upward momentum can only serve you as a being. Take heart in lighter days when you know the laws of God and know that you are loved. And then they close it and say, Amen. So they just kind of wrap it up in a very nice and loving way to me. So
I think if more people understood about religion in general, um, and how religion speaks of these things without
mhm,
speaking of these things, um, when one goes to look into them, they would understand that that's what this is.
mhm.
It is spiritual, but
Love, choice, and free will. That's all in the
it's just
Bible.
there. So it's
It's
like
in
like
all
they said,
religious texts. Mhm.
if you can't wrap your mind around it, or you totally dismiss God in general, you're missing the boat. And it's not gonna it's not gonna be able to make a difference in your life if you don't know how to apply it. That's part of, what I've said a million times too, is
Mhm.
like all this knowledge that we get
Yeah,
as
I
being.
wanted to bring that up because that was one of your big points that you wanted to bring up when we would talk. I said, "What's the life lesson?" And you're like, "All of this is irrelevant if we don't apply it." That was one of the
Yeah.
points you really wanted to talk about.
Yeah, because it's so true. And again, I find, difficulty sometimes in how do I apply it. So
We all do.
I will ask spirit, well, that's great. I love this information. Now, how do I apply it?
Mhm,
How do I do that? Um, and so it's just like asking how, and this like practicing,
mhm,
and then again, alchemy, having faith in what you're doing, having faith in your guidance, and then seeing the fruits of your labor.
mhm,
Seeing is believing.
mhm,
So I encourage people to just try it, just have an open mind. Just start looking at them now and seeing, what the different laws are, because there's
mhm.
108 of them, I guess. I didn't even know that. But it's like, look them up and see what they are.
That's
See
that
which ones
person's point of
resonate.
view. I'm not saying that they're wrong. It just that was just an example of something that I had found.
There's like 13 I know of that were pretty relevant that I was gonna bring out today, but because of length, time, and whatever, we're not gonna do that. Um, but definitely just look into them for
Mhm,
yourself,
mhm, mhm.
and
Well, they
see
gave
what
you 3 to
sparks
start
you.
off with, love, truth, and choice,
Right.
because those permeate for all of us. And, yeah.
Right. But I think if anybody comes from like a religious background, and then they start to study these things, they
Mhm.
might have that same aha moment that I've had, where it was like, wow,
Likewise.
this is
Likewise.
the same
It
concepts
is.
of prayer and all of
Mhm.
these things without having religion. That's why
Mhm.
it's a universal law.
Right.
So
And that's why those truths permeate in so many different, self-help books. People who are considered, he's the self-help guru. So all these people have done is latched onto a universal principle and they've expanded on it, which is beautiful because we need different expressions of these principles. That gives us a chance to express and create in our physical lives. But it's just another way that these principles are being brought into our lives. If you think about Wayne Dyer, or Joe Dispenza, or oh gosh, Anthony Robbins, or any of these people, they're all they've all latched onto a principle, and they're just showing you different ways to look at it, different ways to experience it. So if you want to do that inside religion or outside of it, that potential exists. You don't have to call it God. Uh, but I agree with you. I was very against my religion growing up. And I will say, for people that say, oh, what you're doing is taking you to the devil. No, this has brought me closer to God, not further away from it. I've been
Yeah.
far better able to embrace Christianity now, having understood the 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 connection in all of this
Thank you
than
for
I
saying
ever was
that.
able to do before. So
Yeah.
quite honestly, for those who say that this takes taking me the wrong direction, Christianity drove me from Christianity. This has taken me closer to it than I've ever been in my life
Yes.
before.
Thank
So that may
you.
not be true for everyone,
Right.
but that is
But
true
it
for
was true
me.
for me. It was definitely true
Mhm,
for me. I grew up in a religious household with
mhm,
multiple religions and reading the Bible. And not that I ever, I guess, I wouldn't say that I totally ever turned away from my faith, but it was like, um, definitely, like this kind of thing, where it was like
mhm,
all up
mhm,
in the air. And when I started learning about the law of attraction, um well, what is this? and
mhm,
and then I go back and I read the Bible, and it just totally resonates, and it's like, oh, I get it now. Like,
mhm,
they were talking about these universal concepts in
mhm,
religion
mhm.
without saying that, because that's not how they address it. Jesus didn't say this is how the law of attraction works in the Bible, folks.
Right. It's different language. It's like
Right.
following a self-help guru right now. They're still talking the same stuff. They're just doing it in a different way because we all need to hear things differently, right?
Right.
Like you said, one way is going to click with you and another way is going to click with me. But
Right. So
they're all still the same thing.
yeah.
We're either striving towards moving towards that
And
principle
I
or
had to
away
hear
from
it
it.
multiple times, so it wasn't like I
We
got
all
it right
do.
away.
The
I had to hear it
principles
multiple
are
times.
very, very, they're the nature of God. We are not going to master a principle. We can
No, I
only
thought it was gonna be easy. I was
no.
like, "Oh, it's so good. Oh." And then I was like, "What?" Like, oh my God. So, it's
Yeah.
not just like lickety split, but
No, no, no.
it's
And
taken
that's
me a
the
long
reason.
time to really learn how to apply it, and that's when you master it. So, when you can apply it into your life, that's when you can say, okay, I understand this concept now.
And when you
I've
see the
mastered it.
results from it, and then
Right.
when you get brought another test, let's call, right? It's like you go through a challenging circumstance and you can go, oh, I know what I need to do here. It's like, this is what I need to do to move through this experience. And we move through it very quickly. That's the
Right.
point of the principle. That's the point of understanding it, is that now we've gotten it and we're able to move through it. And let's face it, these principles aren't just about spiritual development. They're about personal development. That's
Yeah.
what spiritual development is personal
Personal
development. It's the
development. Yeah.
development of the consciousness. It's whether you want to call it emotional intelligence or awareness of others, or love or compassion or empathy or whatever. These are all these principles that we are tied to as conscious beings, regardless of whether in physical form or not.
Yeah.
So, with
Agreed.
that being said, do you have any final comments? Because I think we've really hashed this one to death.
Yeah. No, good to go on that.
And I
So hope
think you
everybody
can
understands.
I think you can see now why discussing specific ones was like, it's just not going to be possible. I don't think wasn't what I was feeling when we were setting up these life lessons. I'm like, no, I think we just need to talk about the value of laws, what they are, and then
I
we'll
was thinking we should just make a list, but that's fine because there's 108 of them apparently.
we will not be doing spiritual laws session on 108.
I
I'm
was just
sorry.
gonna say that. No, in fact, I'm like, no, we're not doing all of that.
Well, I
Like,
think we need
a
to pick the
few.
ones that perhaps really apply the most. And, clearly we've talked about love and truth and what was the other one? Gosh, I've lost it already, right?
Love,
Love,
truth, and
choice,
what was
choice.
it?
How can I forget
Oh,
it? They're like,
choice.
hello, Carol, choice, your big one.
Yeah, yeah.
But and I don't want to hammer these home for people either, but I think it will be interesting, at least for me. I like to see what spirit has to say about them, because
Hmm.
each time I get one of these channeled lessons, at least for me, I'm learning something from them I get a new point of view or a new perspective. And did you feel like when you connected with spirit that there was anything that they really wanted you to share, or did you really already touch base on those today?
Um, I think we touched enough on what I
Okay.
was thinking about,
Because
because
sometimes spirit has different opinions than
I
what we
just
do as an ego.
yeah, I just was thinking, well, let's just kind of go through like what the laws are, and going with your channel lesson, understanding that
Mhm.
these laws are like gravity. But I like the fact that your channel lesson brought up something that I didn't really relate to, which was this
Mm,
idea that
mhm,
some people might think of it as like, I'm not going to follow your stupid laws because
mhm,
they're rebellious like me. So I'm
mhm,
like, but I never thought of it in that way. And so if
mhm.
people really are thinking of, the law of attraction, or these what we call universal laws or principles, as some kind of dogmatic new
Mhm,
age spiritual religion, that
mhm.
is the
And that's
exact
not what
opposite
is that's right.
of what
Yes.
we're trying to accomplish here. So I
Yeah.
encourage everyone to do their homework, and that's about it.
And we talked about this as life lessons learned through mediumship. And so, yes, there's mediumship involved in terms of I connect with spirit, and I hope that and I know, not hope, I hope that they're going to give me the best lesson that's necessary for all of us to hear. To me, that's mediumship. I am connecting with higher divine intelligence for the purpose of gaining information to help us. By the way, people, the saints and the prophets did the same thing. So the fact that I'm not doing it within a religion of your choosing is no different than what has happened throughout time. We know of plenty of saints who have connected, had visions, heard the voice of God. The fact that we can accept that because they were Christian, but we can't accept that in people who aren't Christian because they're automatically the devil, to me is just a place that I cannot go. We have to
Right. We're
judge
going
the
to talk about
individual.
religion more, aren't we? We're going to have a whole nother segment on religion.
I know that that was something that was going to be coming up, and so yeah, it's
Well,
like
because when I brought up the attributes of God about in Islam, like I
Mhm.
don't want to go into it because that could be a whole show.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
guess the point I was saying though is that connecting with spirit, I know people who become Christian are like, but you're not supposed to do that. And I'm like, but it's also in the Bible that people have given the gift of discernment of spirit. So where's the truth in all of that lie? The point is, as always, we conclude these shows by saying, take it to your divine source, whatever that is. You meditate, you get the answers for you. Allow spirit, God, whatever it is, to infuse you to help you understand this life lesson that we brought to you today in a manner that works for you, because God will meet each of us where we are and support whatever path that we want to move on. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody. I hope that you will join us next time for life lesson number 8. We're getting close to the end. As always, they get a little more complex. We appreciate any likes or subscribes or shares. So thanks again so much for being with us today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.